Ricky Hatton was supposed to be making a comeback. He was back in the gym. Smiling. Training. Preparing to step into the ring once more, not for titles, not for glory, but to show the world he still had fight left in him. But just hours ago, that comeback turned into tragedy. The man millions called the Hitman is gone. Found dead at his home in Hyde at just 46 years old, the news sent shockwaves through the boxing world, through Manchester, and through the hearts of everyone who ever sang along to A Blue Moon, as Ricky made his walk to the ring. But this isn't just a story about a retired fighter. This is a story about what happens after the crowd stops cheering. About the silent battles that champions carry when no one's looking. And about how the final round Ricky Hatton fought may have been the one he never spoke about. Because what happened behind closed doors might be even more heartbreaking than we ever expected. Let's break it all down. It started with silence. Ricky Hatton didn't show up at the gym on Friday, something completely out of character. Then he missed a boxing match he was supposed to attend. Friends tried calling. No answer. By Saturday morning, someone went to his home in Hyde. And that's when the truth hit like a punch to the gut. The man who once electrified arenas with his fists and fire was found dead in his home. Just 46 years old. No warning. No note. Just a sudden, devastating end to a life that had always seemed larger than the ring itself. Greater Manchester police confirmed there were no signs of foul play, and they weren't treating his death as suspicious. But to the people who knew him, and to the millions who admired him, nothing about this felt ordinary. Ricky had just been seen training again, preparing for an exhibition match in Dubai, his first fight in over a decade. He posted gym videos, shadowboxed for the camera, smiled through sweat. The world thought he was on the comeback trail. Instead, we were watching a farewell we didn't recognize. Fans, friends, and fellow fighters took to social media in disbelief. Tyson Fury said, "There will only ever be one Ricky Hatton." Amir Khan called him a warrior and one of Britain's greatest boxers. And Steve Bunce, the BBC's longtime boxing voice, summed up the moment in 2 words: unbelievably shocking. Because Ricky wasn't just a fighter. He was the working-class heartbeat of British boxing. A man who wore sky blue shorts, walked out to a blue moon, and never forgot where he came from. But even legends have shadows. Before the world mourned him, the world worshipped him. Ricky Hatton wasn't just a boxer. He was a force of nature, relentless, fearless, and utterly impossible to ignore. From the very first time he stepped into the ring in 1997, he carried something rare, the kind of fire that couldn't be taught. He fought 48 times. He won 45 of them. And when he won, he didn't just raise his hands, he lifted an entire city with him. In 2005, he stunned the world by defeating the legendary Kostya Tsayu, a victory that earned him the IBF light welterweight title and solidified his status as a global star. 2 years later, he delivered a brutal body shot knockout to José Luis Castillo, a moment that's still replayed by boxing fans with awe. He walked into arenas draped in sky blue, the colors of his beloved Manchester City. Blue Moon blasted from the speakers. And every time Ricky threw a punch, it felt like a working-class anthem. He wasn't just fighting for the people, he was one of them. But his career wasn't without heartbreak. In 2007, he stepped into the ring with Floyd Mayweather, undefeated, untouchable, and widely considered the best boxer of a generation. Ricky gave it everything he had, but was stopped in the 10th round. 2 years later, Manny Pacquiao delivered a crushing knockout in round 2. Both defeats were brutal, but Ricky's fan base never wavered. Because his greatness wasn't just about titles. It was about heart. about grit. About the way he made people feel, like no matter where you came from, you could still rise. He was the people's champion. And that's what made what came next so difficult to watch. Because after the final bell rang, Ricky wasn't done fighting. His hardest rounds were still ahead, and this time, there was no referee to stop the damage. For most boxers, the fight ends when the final bell rings. But for Ricky Hatton, that's when his darkest battles began. After retiring in 2012, the man who once stood fearless in front of legends like Mayweather and Pacquiao found himself paralyzed by something he couldn't hit back: his own mind. In interviews, Hatton was brutally honest. He spoke openly about his spirals into depression, about waking up with no reason to get out of bed, about drinking to silence the thoughts that wouldn't leave him alone. He admitted he had thought about ending his life. "I tried to take my own life several times," he once said. "I used to go to the pub, come back, take the knife out and sit there in the dark crying." These weren't headlines meant to shock, they were cries for help that resonated with thousands who had quietly battled the same demons. He wasn't just a former champion anymore, he was a mirror for a generation of men taught to suffer in silence. Boxing had given him structure, purpose, identity. And when it was gone, so was the thing that held him together. He tried to find his way back, through training fighters, through public speaking, even through comedy and media work. But the emptiness never fully left. The crowd was gone. The lights were off. And Ricky Hatton was just Ricky, no gloves, no anthem, no armor. But in sharing his story, he did something few ever do: he made vulnerability a kind of strength. He told the world that being broken wasn't weakness, it was human. And still, even as he became a symbol for mental health awareness, few knew just how deep his pain might still run. Just days before the world learned of Ricky Hatton's death, he looked unstoppable. He was back in the gym, gloves on, sweat pouring, that familiar grin flashing between punches. He wasn't training for a championship, he was preparing for something far more personal. A return to the ring in December for an exhibition fight in Dubai. It wasn't about glory. It was about proving, to the world and to himself, that he still had fight left in him. On social media, he posted clips of himself shadowboxing, working the pads, hitting the treadmill. Fans were buzzing. Commentators said he looked focused, healthy, happy. It felt like a fresh chapter was beginning. But then, silence. On Friday, he didn't show up for a gym session he was committed to. Then he failed to appear at a boxing match he had promised to attend. His phone? No response. No texts. No updates. At first, people brushed it off. Maybe he needed rest. Maybe he was laying low before the next media wave. But those closest to him knew, Ricky Hatton never ghosted the ring. And then, on Saturday morning, someone went to check on him at his home, a place he famously called the Heartbreak. That's when they found him. Gone. The timing stunned everyone. He was weeks away from a public comeback. He had just been laughing and training, showing fans he was still in love with the fight. There were no signs, at least, not obvious ones. And yet, maybe the signs were there all along, tucked behind that grin, hidden in the long pauses between Instagram videos, or buried in the silence that followed a missed call. Steve Bunce said it best: training was his salvation. When Ricky stopped showing up to the gym, the alarm bells should have been deafening. The moment the news broke, the world stopped. Because Ricky Hatton wasn't just another retired boxer. He was the people's fighter, and now, the people were grieving. Within hours, tributes flooded social media like a tidal wave of heartbreak. Legends, champions, fans, and friends, all stunned. All trying to find the right words, and failing, because how do you say goodbye to someone who never stopped fighting? Amir Khan, who had shared both the ring and a brotherhood with Ricky, wrote one of the most gut-wrenching tributes. "We tell ourselves we're strong, we train, we sweat, we take hits, we get up, but sometimes the hardest fight happens in silence, in the mind." He wasn't just honoring a champion. He was pointing to a tragedy too familiar, one where the wounds don't bleed, but still kill. Tyson Fury, who called Ricky a friend and a role model, posted 2 photos and kept it simple. "RIP to the legend at Ricky Hatton. There will only ever be one Ricky Hatton. Can't believe this, so young." Boxing commentators were stunned. Steve Bunce called it unbelievably shocking, especially because Hatton had seemed in a really good place. He was planning his next chapter, and then he was gone. Outside the ring, the morning was just as fierce. At the Manchester Derby on Sunday, fans of both Manchester City and Manchester United stood united. A rare moment of silence turned into thunderous applause, a minute of appreciation for the local legend who wore his city not just on his shorts, but in his heart. Outside his home, a place ironically named the Heartbreak, flowers began piling up. Cards, scarves, handwritten notes from people who never met him, but felt like they knew him. One card read, "We can't gather our thoughts at present, so we're not sure what to write. Devastated is the only thing that comes to mind." Stephen Billing, a longtime friend who had also battled alcoholism, tied a blue and white Manchester City scarf to the gate. His voice shaking, he said. He was hard as nails, but not in a bad way. Just real. A proper local lad. And maybe that's what made Ricky so rare. He was a world champion, who never acted like one. A millionaire fighter, who never left the pub behind. A warrior, who always had time for a selfie, a pint, or a quiet word with someone who needed it. And as the tributes poured in, one truth became painfully clear: Ricky Hatton didn't just belong to boxing. He belonged to everyone. For Ricky Hatton, boxing was a career. But Manchester City? That was family. He didn't just support the club, he lived it. Sky blue wasn't just a color on his shorts, it was in his blood. Every time he stepped into the ring, it wasn't just Ricky versus his opponent, it was Manchester versus the world. His walkout song? Blue Moon. His pride? Etihad Stadium. His soul? The streets of Hyde, Stockport, and the pubs packed with City faithful. So when news of his death broke, it wasn't just the boxing world that broke down, it was an entire city. Manchester City released a statement that didn't read like PR. It read like grief. Ricky was one of City's most loved and revered supporters, viewed by many as one of the most compelling personalities the sport has ever produced. They called him an icon. A legend. A man who carried their colors into every arena, every round, every fight, win or lose. And he did it not for attention, but because he never forgot where he came from. At the Manchester Derby, a game that usually divides households and friendships, both City and United fans stood side by side in respect. 1 minute of heartfelt appreciation. No rivalry. No chance. Just a stadium full of people quietly saying, "Thank you, Ricky." City midfielder Phil Foden, visibly emotional, spoke before the match. "My heart goes out to his family. I'm sure he would have been here today. This one's for him. We'll try to do him proud." And they did. Because Ricky Hatton wasn't a global superstar to Manchester. He was their lad. The local boy who never stopped being local. The world champion who never acted too big for the chippy on the corner. He turned up at city games like any other fan. He didn't sit in VIP lounges, he stood with the people, sang the chants, and lived the highs and lows of every match like it was a world title fight. City didn't just lose a fan. They lost a symbol. A heartbeat. And Manchester will never chant Blue Moon again without thinking of the man who made it part of boxing history. In the final months of his life, Ricky Hatton was once again trying to rebuild, not just in the ring, but in his personal life. But behind the gym footage, the training clips, and the comeback hype, something had changed. Just weeks before his death, Ricky had ended a high-profile relationship with actress Claire Sweeney, best known for her role in Coronation Street. The two had seemed happy. Their relationship had captured headlines, fueled paparazzi photos, and brought a new light into Ricky's world. But quietly, it ended. No public fallout. No interviews. Just a private breakup that many fans didn't even know had happened. And after the split, Ricky told close friends he was planning to take a solo holiday, a reset, of sorts. A break from everything. One last deep breath before returning to the spotlight for his Dubai exhibition match. One of those friends was Stephen Billing, a 46-year-old City fan who had known Ricky for years. They shared more than just football loyalty. They shared battles with alcoholism. With depression. With the kind of pain that doesn't show up in photos. Billing recalled their final conversation just 3 months before Ricky's death. He said Ricky was still hurting from the breakup, still trying to figure things out. But he was hopeful. He was making plans. That's what makes it all so hard to believe. He was hard as nails, Billing said. But not in a bad way. Just real. A proper local lad. You wouldn't think he was a professional boxer with millions and millions of pounds. That was the magic of Ricky Hatton. No matter how famous he got, he still felt like someone you'd see at your local pub, leaning on the bar, telling stories like any other lad from the neighborhood. But fame doesn't shield you from heartbreak. And money doesn't mute loneliness. He had trained for the cameras. He had smiled for the fans. But inside, Ricky may have still been fighting off something far more personal, the ache of starting over, the heaviness of silence after love fades. And as his friend placed a blue and white scarf marked, "R.I.P. Ricky," outside the heartbreak, the name of Ricky's home suddenly felt too real. Because maybe it wasn't just a clever name. Maybe it was a reflection of where he truly was, in those final, quiet moments. No foul play. No violent cause. No clear explanation. That's what the police said. And yet, Ricky Hatton is gone. Just like that, a man who fought some of the fiercest warriors in boxing history, who stood toe-to-toe with the greatest of his era, was found lifeless in his home. And the silence around it speaks volumes. There was no big warning. No media panic. No public cry for help. Just a missed gym session, a no-show at a fight, and then the phone stopped ringing. Some say he was fine. Others say he was hurting. But the truth is, you can be both. You can be smiling in the gym and still breaking at home. You can be planning a comeback and still battling the urge to disappear. You can be surrounded by fans, yet feel completely alone. And that's why this story matters far beyond boxing. Because Ricky Hatton's death isn't just about a sporting legend lost. It's about the cost of silence in a world that still doesn't know how to talk about pain. Especially men. Especially fighters. Especially the ones who everyone thinks are too tough to struggle. Mental health doesn't always show itself in breakdowns. Sometimes it shows in withdrawal. Missed calls. Quiet disappearances. A fake smile in a training video. A missed appointment nobody followed up on. And the saddest part? Ricky spent years talking about it. He begged people to speak up, to reach out, to not go through it alone. He turned his story into a message. A warning. A lifeline for others. But maybe no one realized he was still living that story. Still fighting. Still hurting. Still hoping someone would see the signs. And now, the people who loved him are left with questions no one can answer. What if someone had checked in earlier? What if he had said something the day before? What if the pain was just too loud this time? We may never know. But we do know this: the final opponent Ricky Hatton faced wasn't in a ring. It didn't wear gloves. It didn't follow rules. And it didn't give him a chance to get back up. And if this can happen to Ricky, a champion, a hero, a fighter through and through, then it can happen to anyone. Ricky Hatton didn't die in the ring. But make no mistake, he spent his whole life fighting. He fought world champions. He fought for his city. He fought to bring pride to his family, his fans, and the little boy inside him who once dreamed of wearing sky blue under the lights. But his most brutal battles? They never made the highlight reel. He fought loneliness. He fought heartbreak. He fought a mind that refused to stay quiet, even when the world believed he had it all. And in the end, it wasn't a left hook or a knockout punch that took him. It was the kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises. But here's what made Ricky special: he never pretended to be invincible. He shared the dark stuff. The hard stuff. The stuff most champions hide. And in doing so, he gave people permission to not be okay. That might be his most powerful legacy. Not the titles. Not the knockouts. But the truth. The raw, unfiltered honesty of a man who could laugh through pain and still lace up his gloves. He was real. He was vulnerable. He was ours. And now, it's our turn to carry what he left behind. If you're struggling, speak. If someone disappears, check. If the silence feels heavy, don't ignore it. Because Ricky Hatton's final round wasn't about boxing. It was about the fight that far too many face, quietly, invisibly, and alone. Let this be more than a tribute. Let it be a wake-up call. Rest in peace, Ricky. Your fight is over,